The Ridge of Fire. May 5th, 1945, Maeda Escarpment, Okinawa. The world is nothing but smoke-screaming metal and a cliff edge that drops away into darkness. Tracer fire claws through the night like red-hot fingers reaching for men who are trying to disappear into the dirt. The air tastes of cordite and burned canvas thick and bitter on the tongue. Somewhere to your left, a mortar lands with a flat, ugly thump, and the ground bucks under you as if the island itself is trying to throw you off. Private First Class, Desmond Doss presses his helmet tighter against his head and keeps moving. He is small compared to the men around him. Narrow shoulders, thin frame. Just another silhouette in a field jacket soaked dark with sweat and someone else's blood. The Red Cross brassard on his arm is almost black in the dim orange glow of burning brush. His medic's bag hangs off one shoulder, too heavy, thumping against his ribs as he crawls. He does not carry a rifle. Around him, other men from Company B cling to the shattered top of the ridge the papers back home will call Hacksaw. The Maeda Escarpment rises sheer and jagged out of the Okinawan soil, 40-50 feet of rock they had to climb with cargo nets and bare hands. Behind them, that cliff is now just a silhouette against the sky, one more obstacle between them and retreat. In front of them, somewhere in the black tangle of craters and shattered trees, Japanese machine guns hammer out long, punishing bursts. "Get down, get the hell down," a voice roars close enough to feel the spit. Doss drops flat as a spray of rounds chews through the dirt where his head had been. Bits of soil sting his face. Someone groans a raw animal sound that cuts through the chaos, and his body reacts before his mind catches up. He rolls toward the noise fingers digging into the earth, crawling on elbows and knees. "Medic! Medic!" The shout comes out, strangled, ripped from a throat that's already half-choked with fear. He finds the man by touch before he sees him. A boot, a trembling leg, the sticky warmth spreading through torn trouser fabric. Another flare pops somewhere overhead, throwing sharp white light across the ridge. In the sudden glare, Doss sees the wound, a jagged hole high in the thigh pulsing dark. Private Howell. He remembers the face now under the grime. The same man who had once waved a Bible in front of Doss's nose and said, "You think that'll stop a bullet, preacher boy?" Then laughed with the rest of them. Now Howell's hand crushes Doss's sleeve like a vice. "Don't let me die, Doc. Don't let me—" "Hold on, buddy." Doss murmurs, his voice oddly calm in the madness. "You're not going anywhere tonight." He rips open the trouser leg fingers, sure and quick, the motions drilled into muscle memory in places that didn't smell like death. Bandage, sulfa powder, tourniquet. He hears bullets smack into the stump of a shattered tree stump inches above his back, wood chips raining down into Howell's open mouth. "Spit that out," Doss says gently. "Can't have you eating trees. Army food's bad enough." Howell barks out a laugh that turns into a sob. His breathing evens just a little. Pain is still a scream echoing behind his eyes, but the feel of the medic's hands is solid, certain. Doss finishes the tourniquet, tightens it, until the blood flow slows. "Can you move?" Doss asks. Howell shakes his head frantically. "Can't feel my leg. I can't. Then I'll move you," Doss says. He looks over his shoulder. The nearest cover is a blown-out shell crater a few yards back, closer to the cliff. It might as well be on the moon with the amount of fire raking the ridge. Machine guns chatter, searching. A mortar shell explodes close enough that hot air slaps his neck. Doss's heart is hammering, but his voice is steady when he leans down to Howell's ear. "I need you to be real small for me, okay? Tuck in those arms. I'm gonna drag you. Don't you grab at the ground, you'll slow us both down." Howell stares up at him, eyes dilated. "You crazy man. You ain't even armed." Doss just offers him the hint of a smile. "Got all the weapon I need right here?" He taps the medic bag. "And up there." His eyes flick briefly toward the sky. Another man might make the sign of the cross. Desmond Doss doesn't. Seventh-day Adventists have their own ways of talking to God, and he has been talking to him all night in short, silent bursts between bursts of gunfire. "Lord, help me get one more." He worms an arm under Howell's armpits, feels the hot slickness of blood against his sleeve. Then he starts to drag. The weight is immense. Every inch he moves feels like hauling a sandbag soaked in seawater. His boots slip on loose dirt. For a moment he feels the open, exposed space between where he is and where he needs to be, like a physical ache, a stretch of ground with no mercy in it. Bullets snap past each one, a little whip crack of death. He keeps his head down his body as low as he can make it and drags. Howell whimpers, but he stays tucked, just like he was told. The shell crater ahead grows slowly bigger, a dark mouth promising at least a little protection. "Come on, Doss pants," mostly to himself now, "come on." He thinks briefly of the barracks back in basic training in Fort Jackson, the jeers, when he refused to pick up a rifle during drill. "What are you, some kind of coward, Doss? Too good to touch a gun? Is that it gonna win the war with bandages and prayer?" He remembers standing in front of officers who looked at him like a problem to be solved, not a soldier. The court-martial hearings, the long, tense hours where he answered the same question again and again. Why won't you carry a weapon? Because the commandment says thou shalt not kill. Because he had seen what violence did to his father's eyes. Because he believed God had placed him here to save lives, not take them. None of those officers are here on this ridge tonight. Their names don't matter. What matters is Howell's breath, warm against his wrist, the rasp of every inhale. Doss jerks the wounded man the last few feet into the crater, just as another mortar shell slams into the crest behind them. Dirt and rock shower over their heads, pattering against their helmets. For a second, everything is just ringing ears and a solid roar. When his hearing returns in thin, high whines, he hears Howell, "You did it. You crazy bastard. You did it." Doss doesn't answer. He checks the bandage, adjusts the tourniquet, then finally looks back toward the dark, shredded landscape they just crossed. Somewhere out there, more men are crying out. Their voices cut through the night, thin and terrified. "Medic! Medic!" The ridge is supposed to be abandoned. The order has already gone out. Pull back off May to regroup at the bottom. Any sane man would go with them. Climb down the cargo nets, feel the rock under his boots, get away from this slaughterhouse. Doss straightens his aching back, the medic's bag, heavy against his side. He stares into the darkness for a long heartbeat, listening. Then he whispers under his breath, "Lord, help me get one more." And he crawls back out of the crater toward the guns. From Lynchburg to Preacher Boy, the cries on the ridge blur into one long, ragged sound, the word medic, stretching out into something more primitive, more desperate. Desmond Doss moves toward it on hands and knees the way a man crawls toward a faint light in a collapsing tunnel. His hand brushes against an empty cartridge belt still warm. A helmet lies upside down in a puddle water, inside it quivering with every distant blast. Ahead, the silhouettes of bodies break the jagged line of the earth. Some still, some moving, some half-propped against shattered roots. The ridge is hell, but it is not the first hell Desmond has walked through. Years earlier, the air did not smell of cordite and blood. It smelled of Virginia earth after rain of sawdust and sweat and cheap liquor. Lynchburg, Virginia. A small frame house on a patch of yard, a tin roof that rattles when the summer storms roll in. A boy named Desmond watches his father's hands shake as he fumbles with the buttons of his shirt. Outside, someone has parked a Ford crooked in the lane. Inside, a picture of the Ten Commandments hangs crooked on the wall. The argument has already happened. The shouting. The crash of a bottle. The crack of bone against plaster. There is a pistol on the table, now heavy and black and oiled, looking very large in the small kitchen. His father's face is red, his eyes blurred with drink and old pain that goes all the way back to the trenches of the last war. His mother stands between him and the door, one hand pressed to her cheek, where the skin is beginning to swell. "You put that thing down, Tom?" she says, voice tight but steady. "You put that thing down right now." Tom Doss's hand is wrapped around the pistol grip. His fingers flex knuckles white. For a second, the barrel points at the floor. Then it trembles upward toward the wall, toward the ceiling, toward... "Daddy!" Desmond's voice is small but clear. Tom looks at him. The boy is maybe 10, thin as a rail, barefoot on the wooden floor. His eyes are wide. His hands are empty. "You're gonna kill her," Desmond says, and the words taste like rust in his mouth. He's heard that about guns. They make rust in people's souls. For a moment, the world tightens. A sound stretches thin. The ticking of the clock, the slow drip of water from the pump, his mother's breath. Then something breaks. Not the pistol, not the bone. Something inside Tom's chest. He sags. The barrel dips. The pistol hits the table with a dull thud, then slides toward the boy. Desmond flinches back as if it were a snake. He does not touch it. Later, outside, away from the shouting and the tears, Desmond will stare at the picture of the commandments painted on the wall of the little church near their house. "Thou shalt not kill." He will trace the words with his eyes again and again, as if burning them into his mind. He will remember his father's trembling hand, the way death nearly walked into their kitchen and sat down at the table. He will decide that whatever else he is in this life, he will not be the man holding the gun. Years roll forward. The world slides toward war again. Pearl Harbor explodes across every front page. Friends talk about enlisting, about uniforms, about giving those Japs what's coming to them. Posters sprout up like weeds. Uncle Sam pointing flags, waving bold letters, screaming, "I want you." Desmond feels the pull just like they do. Maybe stronger. He loves his country. He believes deeply that evil has to be resisted. But there is that line on the wall in the little church, "Thou shalt not kill." He sits with his Bible open on his knees, fingers resting on the thin pages, and he tries to square the two things: a world that needs defending and a God who says not to take life. He finds something else in those pages, in the stories of healers and good Samaritans and men who refuse to bow to kings. Maybe he thinks there is another way to go to war. So when he walks into the recruiting office and signs the papers, he does it with his jaw set and his palms sweating. The sergeant behind the desk looks up at him, eyes moving over the lanky frame, the quiet face. "You ready to carry a rifle, son?" Desmond swallows. "No, sir." The sergeant frowns. "You do know this is the Army, right?" "Yes, sir. I'd like to serve as a medic." Basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, turns sweat and dust into a daily sacrament. Men curse in accents from all over America. Boots slam the ground in rhythm. Rifles clack in unison when they're brought to the shoulder. Drill sergeants roar until the veins in their necks stand out. "Pick up that rifle, Doss." Desmond stands at the end of the line, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on some invisible point just above the horizon. The M1 lying at his feet glows in the sun. "Sir," he says quietly, "I can't." The laughter starts at his elbow and rolls down the ranks. "You hear that Jesus boy can't pick up a gun? Gonna pray the bullets away, Doss. Maybe he'll throw bandages at the Japs." They call him coward, crazy traitor. They trip him in the barracks, hide his boots, shove him in the showers. At night, when the lights are out, someone hisses from the bunk above, "You're gonna get us killed. You know that. When we need you to shoot, you'll be hiding behind that Bible." Desmond lies awake, staring at the slats above him, the sounds of snoring and restless bodies filling the dark. He hears their words. They dig in deeper than any splinter. But every morning he gets up. He runs their runs, climbs their ropes, crawls their mud. He's not faster or stronger than most, but he's stubborn. When men fall out of marches gasping by the roadside, he's the one dropping back to haul them up, slinging an arm over his own shoulders and pushing on. On the rifle range, he stands to the side, hands clasped behind his back, watching bullets punch neat holes in paper silhouettes. "Why won't you just shoot the damn thing?" once Doss, one of the officers, demands, exasperated. "Because if I touch it," Desmond says, "I might find out I'm good at it. And then it'll be harder not to do it again." The officers don't like that answer. Paperwork begins to flow. Reports, evaluations, a recommendation for court-martial on grounds of disobeying direct orders. Desmond sits in a room with bare walls and too much echo, facing men with brass on their collars and tight lines around their mouths. "Private Doss, do you refuse to serve your country?" "No, sir." "Do you refuse to obey orders?" No, sir, just that one. The one to carry a weapon. Then what exactly do you think you're doing here? I'd like to save lives, sir, not take them. In another time, another war, they might have thrown him out. As unfit, washed their hands of the problem. But the Army needs bodies. And there is eventually a ruling he can serve as a combat medic unarmed so long as he performs his duties. His unit is not thrilled. The names get worse: preacher boy, coward, sometimes fists. But there are moments, too, that begin to change things. In training accidents, he's right there, hands steady on a broken limb, voice calm over a man thrashing in pain. He's the one remembering to check a tourniquet to change a bandage before infection sets in. He stays late to clean the aid station. He volunteers for extra duty. He does not retaliate when they push him. He just endures. When they finally ship out across the Pacific, the men in his unit still don't trust him with their lives. Not yet. That is going to change on a blasted hunk of cliff the men call Hacksaw Ridge, where the ground shakes with artillery and the air shrieks with bullets. On May 5, 1945, as machine guns rake the top of the Maida escarpment and wounded men scream in the dark, Desmond Doss crawls out of a shell crater unarmed and goes looking for the next soul he can drag back from the edge. Lord help me get one more. The darkness on the ridge feels thicker now, as if the smoke and dust have weight. Every explosion is a flashbulb that freezes the world for a heartbeat, stumps of trees like broken teeth, torn bodies sprawled where they fell, the ghostly outline of the cliff edge just behind. Desmond Doss moves in those flashes. He keeps low chest scraping the ground medic's bag, digging into his side. He has no helmet light, no night vision. All he has is sound, the wet cough, the strained whisper, the choked off doc. Over here. His fingers touch boot leather, then flesh. He follows it up to a knee, a thigh. His hand comes away slick. Easy, he breathes. Just me. The man he finds this time is half buried in loose dirt. A blast has thrown him into the side of a crater, and the earth has partially collapsed over his legs. He's trying to dig himself out with both hands, but one arm hangs limp at a wrong angle. Can't move my legs, Doc, he gasps. Think I'm stuck. They pulled out, they left us. Doss doesn't say, yeah, they did. He doesn't say, you should have been on those nets when the order came. He just starts digging, scooping away dirt with his bare hands, stopping only when a flare hisses overhead and washes everything in harsh white. He freezes when the light comes. Stillness has become reflex. Any movement draws fire. In the bleach-white glare, he can see them dark shapes, further along the ridge hunched behind low mounds. Japanese rifles' bayonets glinting. A machine gun set low barrel smoking. A mortar team adjusting their tube. The flare sputters, dies. The world snaps back to black and red. He digs faster. It takes minutes that feel like an hour to free the man's legs. One of them is broken bone pressing against skin. Doss splints it with a piece of shattered board and a strip torn from his own shirt, then checks the arm. Dislocated, maybe. He braces himself and warns the man on 3. 1, 2, and jerks. The scream could wake the dead, or the enemy, which amounts to the same thing. But the joint slides back into place. The man's breathing evens out from ragged to merely sharp. What's your name, Doss asks? Because names make people stay in their bodies. Jackson, the man grits out. Private Jackson, B Company. Well, Private Jackson, Doss says, looping a rope around the man's chest tonight. You get an express ticket down this ridge. Jackson blinks. Down how nets are on the other side. The Japs are between us and... Not that way, Doss says quietly. Straight over. Earlier, when most of the living had already clattered and slid down the cargo nets, Doss had found another way. A length of rope, a stump near the cliff's lip, a quick, ugly knot. It's not neat. It's not in the manual. But it holds. He drags Jackson in a painful crawl to the edge. The ground falls away into blackness. Far below, dim shapes move. American helmets, medics, stretcher bearers at the base of the escarpment, tiny as toy soldiers. When they saw the first wounded man coming down on that rope sling, a limp shape swaying against the rock face, They had thought some miracle of gravity was at work. Then they realized someone up there was lowering them, one after another. Doss loops the rope between Jackson's legs under his armpits, forming a crude harness. "You're going to feel yourself tip backwards," he explains. "You're not falling, you're lowering." "You sure this thing holds?" Jackson whispers. Doss thinks of the knot he tied in the dark hands shaking hours ago. He thinks of the weight of the others he's already sent down. He thinks of how his arms are beginning to feel like bags of wet sand. "It's held all night," he says. "You'll be fine." He braces his feet, pays out the rope hand over hand, muscles screaming. Jackson disappears over the edge, cursing under his breath, then louder as the cliff face scrapes his boots. Doss leans back, every fiber of his thin frame straining. For a few terrifying seconds, the rope jerks, as if it will rip itself free. "Easy, Pants, easy now." Far below, a shout rises. "Got him, we got him." Doss slumps to his knees, sweat cold on his spine despite the heat. He lets the slack rope coil on the ground, fingers numb. For a moment he could stop. He could tie the end off, crawl to the nets, and climb down. No one would blame him. The ridge is supposed to be cleared. The Japanese are already feeling their way back into the positions the Americans abandoned. Every second he stays is borrowed. But the cries are still there. Somewhere behind him, a man is sobbing for his mother. To his right, someone is trying to shout and only managing a wet gurgle. Doss presses his forehead to the dirt. His lips move soundlessly. "Lord, help me get one more." He gets back up. The night becomes a loop crawl. Listen, find, treat, drag, rig, lower, pray. Time stops belonging to the clock and starts belonging to the next voice. The next outstretched hand. He finds a sergeant with shrapnel in his back teeth clenched so hard they've chipped. He stuffs gauze into the wound, whispers, "Bite on this instead," and hauls him 3 body lengths at a time, resting only when his vision goes gray at the edges. He stumbles onto a man lying on his stomach, not moving, and rolls him gently, already reaching for bandages, and sees that half the man's chest is gone. There's nothing to save. Doss closes the staring eyes with 2 fingers, murmurs a verse he learned as a boy, and moves on. He crawls right past a Japanese foxhole he doesn't see until he's almost on top of it. 2 figures inside, shadows against shadows. One raises a rifle. For an electric second, Doss looks straight into the muzzle, a black circle in a black night. He freezes. They freeze. Then the rifle lowers just a fraction. The soldier's eyes flick to the red cross on Doss's arm, then back to his face. The second man in the hole is lying down, clutching his stomach. He is making the same small, keening noises Doss has heard all night from American mouths. They stare at each other, American medic, Japanese infantrymen, in a strange, silent truce. Doss slowly raises his empty hands, palms out. He backs away on his knees, heart pounding so loud he's sure they can hear it. The rifle does not rise again. Later he will wonder if he imagined it, if the darkness played tricks on his mind. But in the moment, it feels like one more impossible mercy in a night built on them. At some point, the eastern sky starts to pale just a shade. Dawn is thinking about coming. Doss has no idea how many men he's dragged, lifted, lowered. He only knows his shoulders burn with every movement, his fingers are raw where the rope has bitten into them, and his throat tastes of dust and copper. He goes back out again. He finds men who refuse to share a foxhole with him in basic training, men who laughed when he prayed over his food, men who once said, "I ain't trusting my life to a guy too scared to carry a gun." Now their fingers claw at his sleeves, their eyes lock onto his like a lifeline. "Don't leave me, Doss. Please, don't leave me here." "I won't," he says again and again, even when he's not sure his legs will hold for one more drag. Below, the pile of wounded at the base of the cliff grows. Medics there begin to realize they're not just collecting stragglers. They're receiving a steady stream, one at a time, all coming from the same direction. "Who's sending these guys down?" someone mutters, as another limp shape swings into reach. Up top alone on the ridge, Desmond Doss straightens his back, wipes his bloody hands on his trousers, and turns toward the sound of another voice in the dark. "Lord, help me get one more." Respect earned in blood. By the time the sun breaks over Okinawa, The Meta escarpment looks less like a ridge and more like the skull of some giant creature that has been chewed on all night. The light doesn't make it safer. It just makes every horror sharp. Bodies lie where they fell, stiff, in grotesque shapes. The shredded trunks of trees cast twisted shadows. Smoke drifts in lazy curls from still smoldering brush. Here and there the ground is slick with something darker than mud. Desmond Doss blinks against the daylight, his pupils blown wide from hours in the dark contract painfully. For a second his eyes blur. He has to steady himself with a hand on a rock. Below, distant but clear now, he can hear the organized chaos of the aid station. Shouted orders, clatter of stretchers, the grind of engine blocks as ambulances rev. Men are alive down there because he sent them. That thought feels too big to hold in one exhausted mind. Doss! The shout comes from the lip of the escarpment near the cargo nets. It's a voice from another world. The world that had already retreated before the night became its own kind of battle. He turns. Figures haul themselves up over the edge boots scraping rock. Helmets, rifles, grimy faces. A squad from his company sent back up to probe, to see if anything is left to hold, or salvage, or bury. Sergeant Howell, leg bandaged from the wound Doss treated hours ago, jaw clenched, leads them. He shouldn't be up here. But here he is anyway, limping one hand on the net, the other on his rifle. How the hell? Howell starts, then stops, words tripping over whatever he had expected to find. He had expected a graveyard and maybe a handful of stragglers. He had not expected Desmond T. Doss, Private First Class, to be standing in the middle of the devastation like some scarecrow that forgot to fall. Doss's uniform is almost unrecognizable. The olive drab is stained a dozen shades of brown and red. The white of his Red Cross brassard is smeared dark. Rope burns strip the skin from his hands. His face is gray with fatigue, eyes sunk deep. How many are down there? Howell demands, voice sharp, as if anger is easier than whatever else he's feeling. Doss licks dry lips, tries to count in his head. The night is a blur, men blurring into each other, one body after another over the edge. He shakes his head slowly. I don't know, Sarge, he answers. His voice is a rasp. Just one more. Kept trying to get one more. They look at him then. Really look at him. These are the same men who once hid his boots, who tossed their mess kits onto his bunk, who mumbled about that Bible freak behind his back. Men who threatened him, told him if he went into combat without a rifle, they'd make sure he paid for it. Now they stand in front of him on a ridge where he stayed when everyone else left. Jackson, the man he lowered last, is down there getting morphine and a ticket to the hospital ship. Howell's leg is still attached in large part because of the tightness of Doss's tourniquet. Others, those who can't stand right now, who are lying in rows under canvas, are alive because this small, unarmed medic dragged them out of hell with his bare hands. A change moves through the group like a wind you can't see but feel on your skin. Someone says at first, almost under his breath, "You crazy son of a gun." Another voice, rough, "Thought you were going to get us killed. Doss." Howell steps closer, studying his face as if seeing a stranger. "You stayed up here all night?" he asks. Doss shrugs one shoulder. Even that small motion feels like a weight. "There were still men calling," he says simply. "There's no sermon in it, no drama, just fact." Howell lets out a breath that might be a laugh, might be a sob. Then he does something no one in the unit has done since basic training. He holds out his hand. For a moment, Doss just looks at it, fingers still curled from gripping rope and uniforms all night. Then he reaches out. Their palms meet in a firm, shaking grip. "Glad you're on our side," Doc Howell says quietly. Behind him, the other men shift. Someone claps Doss on the shoulder. Another mutters, "I ever called you a coward? I was out of line." They don't suddenly become saints. They'll still swear, still gamble, still jostle each other and complain about rations. But after this morning, there is a new constant in the way they look at Desmond Doss. From now on, he's not preacher boy. He's the medic who came back for them when the whole world was trying to wipe them off the map. The fighting on Okinawa doesn't end with that night. The ridge will be taken again. Rain will come turning everything to sucking mud. Japanese counterattacks will slam into their lines, and every assault will leave more men in need of bandages and whispered reassurances. Doss will be there moving through it all. Days later, a grenade will arc into a foxhole near where he's working. There's no time to think. He'll shove one man out of the way, throw himself toward the blast, feel the air turn solid and sharp as shrapnel tears into his legs. He'll lie in the mud, blood soaking his trousers, and refuse a stretcher long enough to direct medics to other worse wounded. When they finally convince him to go, he'll be hit again. A sniper's bullet, shattering his arm as he's carried towards safety. He'll use a rifle for the first and only time in the war then, not to fire, to splint his own broken arm. He'll lash it tight against the wood teeth gritted and hobble the rest of the way under his own power. Even broken, he refuses to be dead weight. Later, much later, there will be paperwork, witness statements. Men whose names he can barely remember will write in careful, halting sentences about what he did on that ridge. He kept praying, "Lord, help me get one more." He went into enemy fire again and again, no gun, just that medic bag. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here to write this. Numbers get attached, 75 men rescued. Some argue it was more, some less. The Army will settle on that figure. It's easier to print a number than a prayer. Months after Okinawa, the war will end. Battleships in Tokyo Bay. Celebrations in Times Square. Flags, kisses, confetti. The country will begin slowly to try to understand what it has just lived through. In Washington, D.C., a quiet man from Lynchburg, Virginia, will stand in a hall under chandeliers and look very small in an oversized dress uniform. His left arm is still stiff from the bullet that broke it. His legs ache in the rain. He will stand at attention as the President of the United States reads words that try to compress nights like Hacksaw Ridge into sentences on stiff paper. Private First Class Desmond T. Doss. The Medal of Honor is a blue ribbon with a star designed to be worn at the throat. Its metal is cool against the skin. It's the highest award his country can give, usually handed to men whose acts of heroism involved charging, firing, destroying. Doss never fired a shot. The citation will list the number of men he saved, the wounds he took, the times he refused evacuation to keep working. It will talk about outstanding bravery and conspicuous gallantry above and beyond the call of duty. What it won't quite capture is the stubborn, quiet line that ran through all of it. A boy in a small Virginia house staring at the words, "Thou shalt not kill." A young man standing on a firing range refusing to touch an M1. A medic crawling across a ridge whispering, "Lord, help me get one more." You watching this now might be tempted to put him in a glass case labeled saint or fanatic. The truth is messier. He was scared. He bled. He doubted himself. He was in almost every way an ordinary man, except that when the world around him insisted that killing was the only language that mattered, he found another one to speak. On Hacksaw Ridge, in the space between duty to his country and obedience to his God, Desmond Doss built a narrow bridge out of rope bandages and faith and somehow walked it without falling. A quiet man after a loud war, the words about Hacksaw Ridge hang in the air like smoke, and then the scene shifts, years sliding past in a blink. October 12, 1945, South Lawn of the White House, Washington, D.C. The sky is a clean, polished blue, the kind you don't see much in the Pacific. Rows of soldiers stand in dress uniforms, ribbons, neat shoes shine to a mirror. A band waits, with instruments gleaming. Reporters crowd behind ropes, notebooks, ready cameras heavy around their necks. Desmond Doss stands in line with 14 other men, each of them carrying a story carved into their bones. His dress jacket doesn't sit quite right on his frame. He's lost weight since the hospital. The sling on his left arm has been removed for the ceremony, but he can still feel the phantom ache where the bullet broke it. Under the cloth, the skin is a map of scars, grenade shrapnel, surgical stitches, the mark of a war that didn't think much of his beliefs and tried its best to send him home in a box anyway. The president steps forward. Harry S. Truman looks more like a banker than a wartime leader. Rimless glasses, neat suit, a face lined more by paperwork than battlefields. But when he walks down the line, the atmosphere shifts. Even the most hardened sergeants straighten just a fraction more. When he reaches Doss, he takes the small blue ribbon the star attached to it, catching the sun, and lifts it. For a second, Doss feels that cool metal brush his skin. It is the opposite of Hacksaw Ridge. Here the grass is manicured, the air tastes of autumn instead of cordite, and the only sound is the drone of distant traffic and the murmurs of an expectant crowd. Truman leans closer as he settles the ribbon around Doss's neck. "I'm proud of you," he says low enough that only Doss can hear it. "You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." Doss doesn't know what to say to that. He had not come here for words. He had not gone to war for medals. He had gone because he couldn't stand the thought of others bleeding alone. He swallows, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sir." Cameras click. The band starts up. Somewhere a reporter's pencil scratches the phrase "hero without a gun." After the ceremony, there will be interviews, questions that try to untangle what he did into neat motives. "Didn't you ever think about picking up a weapon when things got bad? Aren't you afraid young men will copy you and refuse to fight? What was going through your mind when you ran back into enemy fire again and again?" He will answer simply in the same slow Virginia cadence he grew up with. "I just wanted to help the boys. I couldn't go out there and kill, but I could go out there and save. I asked the Lord to help me get one more." And he did. Then the cameras will turn away, chasing the next headline. The country will shift its attention to homecoming's election's new fears. The ridge will remain in Okinawa under rain and moss and the careful footsteps of those who come after. Desmond Doss will go home. Home is not the same. His left arm doesn't bend quite right. Old wounds throb when the weather changes. A cough that started as a nuisance lingers, deepens, until doctors shake their heads and say the word tuberculosis. For 5.5 years, he is in and out of hospitals, losing a lung, and 5 ribs in the process. Carpentry, the trade he thought he'd return to, becomes impossible. But other things grow in the space war carved out of him. He marries Dorothy, the nurse, who had seen him when he was just another battered body in a government ward, and saw something else. They build a small life in Rising Fawn, Georgia. A simple house, a patch of land, a garden that responds to patience and care. A son, Desmond Jr., toddles through rows of corn and tomatoes with a stick for a rifle and a bandage roll for a toy. War is never far. It lurks in the way he stands at the window when a thunderstorm rolls in, watching lightning flicker like distant artillery. It sits in the corner when he wakes from dreams of men calling his name in the dark. But he doesn't let it own the house. He travels sometimes at the Army's request, stands in front of young soldiers and tells them what he did, not to make them refuse guns. That choice, he insists, is between them and God, but to show that courage can look like a man moving toward the wounded instead of toward the sound of the enemy's guns. He appears on a television show once, This Is Your Life, surprised on camera, confronted with faces from his past, the host booming his story to a national audience. He smiles shyly, hands folded, clearly more comfortable under fire than under studio lights. The Medal of Honor itself spends most of its time in a box. Years turn. His body pays the old bills. War sent more health problems, more hospital stays. An overdose of antibiotics steals his hearing for a while. Technology later gives it back in the form of a cochlear implant. He buries Dorothy after a car accident, remarries, keeps tending to small things. A garden, a church, the occasional letter from someone who saw his name in a book or a documentary. You can picture him there if you like, an elderly man on a porch, hands knotted by age, eyes still clear. The ridgeline in front of him is not Meta Escarpment, now just the gentle rise of Georgia hills. But when he looks at it in the long light of afternoon, sometimes the color seems to drain out, and for a moment he is back on Okinawa. The edge of the cliff under his boots, a rope burning his palms. In those moments, the question may drift across your mind. Was it worth it? For him, the answer never seems in doubt. He didn't save nations or redraw maps. He didn't capture a bunker single-handedly or plant a flag on some symbolic height. He didn't end the war. He just changed the ending of the story for 75 men who would otherwise have died alone on a ridge far from home. Those men went on to have children and grandchildren, to work in factories, run small businesses, teach classrooms, coach little league, sit at dinner tables, and say grace. Their lives spread out from that night on Hacksaw Ridge like ripples from a stone dropped in water. Most never did anything the history books would notice. But for Desmond Doss, every one of them was a reason to pray, Lord, help me get one more. He died on March 23, 2006 at 87 years old, lungs finally too tired to keep pulling in air. They laid him to rest under a clean white headstone in a national cemetery, one more row of granite amid many. If you were to stand there, run your fingers over the carved name, you might not feel any different air on your skin. The grass would be just grass. The wind, just wind. But somewhere back up the timeline on a shattered ridge above Okinawa in May of 1945, a young man without a rifle is still crawling through the dark, still reaching for a wounded hand, still whispering a prayer that sounds almost like a bargain. Lord, help me get one more. And because he kept saying it again and again, 75 men got to climb out of their own nightmares and step back into the light.